So we are live and we welcome all of you to the All Student Forum. And I'll turn the program. My name is Cindy Pavla. I work in the President's office. And I'd like to turn this over to the chair of the NMU Board of Trustees, Mr. Steve Young.
Thank you, Cindy, and welcome everybody, and pleasant Tuesday evening to everyone. I want to thank you for being here, and we're excited about this forum this evening, and we've got some fair amount of time set aside for it, so we're looking forward to doing that. Again, as Cindy said, I'm Steve Young, and I'm chair of the NMU Board of Trustees. I was appointed for a term that began in January of 2019 by former Governor Rick Snyder. And I'm actually started serving as chair at the beginning of this year, following Tammy Savoy, who's our immediate past chair. And we do have several other board members on this Zoom this evening, and they will be introducing themselves to you in a minute and providing a little background and information about themselves. But before we do that, I do want to point out we've got three trustees that unfortunately are not able to be with us this evening due to some other commitments. Trustees Bob Mahaney, Jason Morgan, and Lisa Fatante. They all send their regrets, but they apologize for not being able to be here. We're also pleased, if we could just take a minute to point out that we have our newest trustee joining us this evening, and that's Missy Holmquist is with us tonight. She was just appointed to our board in February by Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And so this is, I think, maybe her first public meeting with us. And so we want to welcome her on that front and also introduce the students to her. And she'll be providing a little more background about herself in a second. But I do want to say before we get started, a couple of things. One of the top priorities, I think, of this board as we started out this year was that we believe that as a board, we need to improve our communications with key stakeholders. And obviously, students are one of our most key stakeholders that we work with. And that's why we're here this evening. And we want to start that process of trying to improve that communication link between students and us. And we want to say also that this will not be a one-off. We want to make this a regular, not infrequent thing that we do with students so that we can get feedback from you and you can hear from us about what's going on. And we're very sincere about that. And I hope that you understand that and that tonight proves that we are serious about it. And secondly, I would also point out that when we met earlier this year in February, we decided that we wanted to appoint a point person from our board to interface with students. And the board decided that we wanted to try that. And we decided we asked Jason Morgan, our trustee from the Ann Arbor area, is also an NMU alumni. He was involved in ASN at NMU, to be that point person. And I talked to Jason yesterday. He's excited about that. He regrets that he can't be here to talk a little bit more about it with you tonight, but he will be reaching out to student groups about what we can be doing to make that process and our communication a little bit better. So with that, I've talked long enough, and what I'd like to do at this time is basically ask our trustees that are on this Zoom tonight to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. And the way we're doing this is we're doing it from the most senior members, those that have been on our board the longest, down to our newest members. And that, of course, will be Missy, who will be our last. So according to that looks like Tammy Savoy, our immediate past chair, will kick off that. So Tammy.
Thank you. So I'm Tammy Savoy, and I was appointed to serve on this board starting January 1 of 2015. This is my 8th and final year of serving on the board. My term will end in December of this year. I'm an attorney, and I live in Marquette with my husband, Ken, who was also an attorney. We raised our 3 children here, lived here since 1989. My youngest just graduated from Northern in December, and I had the very sincere pleasure of handing her diploma, which was a really special occasion for me. serving on Northern's board has been really important to me, and I've learned so much about higher education and the challenges that are faced in higher education. I remember what it was like as a student, felt it as a parent, and sitting on the board is another perspective. So thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, I think Alexis is next.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, my name is Alexis Hart. I'm really excited to be here with everyone tonight. I was appointed to the board January 1st, 2017. So I've had the pleasure to serve on the board for several years now. In my day job, outside of the board of trustees, I am an HR director for Daimler Trucks North America Corporation. We make things like Freightliner trucks and school buses and things of that nature. My background is always been in the HR space. Right now I'm serving as our culture leadership and development director. I have a passion for diversity and inclusion. It's always been a huge focus for me in my career. I live actually downstate in Royal Oak, Michigan, and I love every opportunity I can to get up to the Upper Peninsula. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm looking forward to spring when I can start golfing again. That's my passion. And I have 3 dogs at home. Those are my babies, Zeke, Zoe, and Zeta. And working in a remote COVID environment over the past few years, they've been my little coworkers at my feet. So it's been nice. So again, happy to be here today and looking forward to everyone's question and some interactive dialogue.
Thanks, Alexis. I think Greg, you're up next, I think.
Hi, I'm Greg Sepidin, and I am an NMU alumnus. I was the first in my immediate family to graduate with a higher education degree. My grandfather on my father's side came from Finland around 1900, and I settled in Nagani. My grandfather, Alvin Sepidin, worked in the underground iron ore mines till he was killed in an underground mine accident in the late 30s. My father, after serving in the Army in Europe at the end of World War II, came back to the UP, worked in the underground mines, then made the choice to join the Michigan State Police around 1950. My dad was transferred around the state to different state police posts about every 3 or 4 years. So growing up, I lived in Bad Axe, Sheboygan, Wakefield, Ypsilanti, and finally graduated from high school in St. Ignace. Like my father, I found myself in the Army during the Vietnam War, but was fortunate to end up in the Old Guard in the Washington, D.C. area as part of the Presidential Saluting Battery. For those who visited Arlington Cemetery, this is the Army battalion that included the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, Pipe and Drum Corps, the Army Drill Team, and other ceremonial units like my saluting battery. Upon my discharge, I came home to Nagani and used the GI Bill at NMU to become an educator. Northern had a well-deserved reputation for supporting veterans, as they still do today. I graduated from Northern with background in history, geography, and education on the academic side, and also completed the welding program through the Jacob Eddy Skills Center. I'm now retired out of the Market Area Public Schools, where I taught history, government, and economics. I also have been and am still active in local environmental groups, labor organizations, and have held elected office in Marquette County on the Marquette County Board of Commissioners and at the local township level, where I've lived for the past 40 years. I was honored last year when Governor Whitmer appointed me to the NMU Board of Trustees, and I really appreciate and thank you for having us here today.
Thank you, Greg. Very well done. Missy, you're up.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm the newest member here and really excited to join this diverse board. I'm Missy Holmquist. I am the CEO of the Upper Peninsula Health Plan, and I live right here in Marquette, Michigan. I am also an NMU alum. I graduated in 2002 with my bachelor's degree and in 2004 with my master's degree. And fortunate to stay here in the Marquette area where I absolutely love to live here. I also am active in the Marquette Ambassadors and also the Economic Club of Marquette County. I'm married. I live here with my son, with my husband and my son. My husband is the Marquette City Land Surveyor, and my son is going into high school next year. So that's a big change for me. So getting excited for him. Some other things I like to do and enjoy. My son is really big into baseball, so I spend a lot of my time watching baseball games and helping out. I used to take Book a long time when he was younger. Also enjoy being outdoors, I'm sure as many of you as well, enjoying our mountain biking trails, going camping, and just enjoying all that Marquette County has to offer. So I'm truly honored to have been appointed to the board. As Steve mentioned, I was very recently appointed just in February to complete a term ending in December of 2026. So this evening is my first official opportunity to partake in an event. And really, I am here to listen and to hear all that you have to offer and really hear from the students. So again, excited to be here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Missy, and we're excited too to have you on the board. We're finally back at full strength. And I know for the students, so they know we had a period of time there when we had 7 members and we had some vacancies, and we are finally back at full strength. And we think that Donna Murray Brown, who left us and her family moved to Kentucky, she would be difficult to replace, but obviously Missy is stepped right in, and we're just totally excited about that. So before I turn it over to Cindy, I would just ask that the students that are on, there is a Q&A function here that we would ask you to type in any questions you have. They'll show up here, and Cindy will help us try and work through those. So if we could start that process as you're listening, that would be helpful. So we got some questions in the queue. Also understand that there was some topic areas that were given to Dr. Schuling, President Schuling, that we would like to also discuss, but also any other questions you might have. So if you could focus on that and do that, we would appreciate it. And I will turn it over to Cindy, who's going to do some other introductions, I believe.
Yes, we have several members of the senior administration team here on this Zoom. I'm going to save President Schuling for last because she can say a few comments before she introduces our ASNMU representatives. But I'll just quickly introduce some of the others, and if each of you could wave or in some other way indicate who you are. So we'll start with our interim provost, Dale Capella. Our vice president for finance and administration, Gavin Leach. Our chief of police, Mike Bath. Our executive director of board and government relations, Deanna Hemela. Our executive director, vice president for extended learning and community engagement, Steve Vandenhoven. Our dean of students, assistant vice president, Chris Greer. Our CEO of the NMU Foundation, Brad Kennelly.
Who's having video problems.
Who's having visual problems. Did I miss anybody from the staff? I think I got everybody. And at this time, I'll introduce interim president, Carrie Schuling, who would like to say a couple of comments before we get started.
Hi, I'm going to be brief because I know everybody's anxious to get questions answered. I just really want to thank, Bethany Beavers, who is president of the ASNMU, and Tom Keller, who is the vice president, for contacting me and for, patiently working back and forth to make this happen. The students were extremely excited that our board members were going to be able to attend, and that was the entire purpose for having this by Zoom. So on behalf of all of us, we're very appreciative the board is here. Bethany's having video problems, so she can't wave, but Tom, you could give a wave. And I'll turn it over to Chair. Well, I think Cindy, you're going to be asking the questions. So away we go.
I am, but I'm going to remind everybody who's participating to put their questions in the Q&A. And I'm going to run through the topics very quickly that were suggested to us by ASNMU, just as a reminder. And then I'm going to, I know Bethany and Tom wanted to say a couple of introductory remarks, so we'll turn it over to them. But some of the topics we were asked to prepare for were COVID-19, the presidential search process and progress, diversity on campus, campus sustainability, carbon neutrality, project and building updates. And those were the topics that were given to us. As Chair Young said, we are open to any questions that you have. So you can go ahead and start putting those in the Q&A. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Bethany and or Tom.
All right, I can talk. So like President Schuling said, I am having video problems, but hello, my name is Bethany. I'm the president of ASNMU. I'm super excited to be able to participate in this just because it's a really cool opportunity to branch admin and students and the board and just kind of all of these different aspects of campus. So hopefully students have this opportunity to kind of ask some of their questions and maybe come away with a greater sense of connectedness with campus. So I'm super excited, and yeah, I'm here with Tom Keller, my vice president. Yeah, take it away, Tom.
I'm just very thankful for all of you coming out for this, and I'm just glad we can all work together and create a better campus for everybody and get everybody better connected. That's all I really got to say.
All right, thank you. So let's get started with some questions. We have a couple that have come in at this point. This first one is, what is the data and or thought process behind our current mask protocol? And can we expect an amendment or lifting soon? And we have had Steve talk, Chair Young has been involved in a lot of our COVID discussions and progress. So we'll start with Steve.
Yeah, this is a really great question. And I think back to, when we first started dealing with all this back in March of 2020, and how our students and faculty and staff really have stepped up to the plate since that time, continuing right up till the time we're talking this evening. We've had tremendous cooperation from our student body in terms of dealing with these issues. And I remember when we were first talking about this way back in March of 2020, and I'm just thinking, how are we ever going to do this? And how are we ever going to get people to cooperate? How is it ever going to all come together? And fast forward to today, it's really been an amazing journey. And I want to start out by just thanking our students for their commitment to helping us through this, because a lot hinged on what everybody did and what your neighbor did and what your neighbor's neighbor did and what your suite mate did and people in other dorms. And people really stepped up to the plate. We're at a point now where we all want to believe in our heart of hearts that this is behind us. And I think we're unfortunately reminded sometimes daily that that's not the case. We're doing much better than we were, but now we're hearing there's some outbreaks in China, and so there's 2 mutations that are surfacing. So we're not totally out of it. We're aware of it, and we're aware of the issues that with masks and what masks have become associated with and everything else. But I think at this point, the decision has been made to stay with our current mask requirements and not change anything, at least in the short term. And if that changes, you're going to be the first to know. But right now, I think we're in that kind of a gray area where we're not quite sure. And if we make changes too quickly, we could all be back in the soup. So I don't know if there's any other trustees that want to weigh in on that as well. And then we could have Carrie also comment, but I would also point out just on the testing that we've been doing, our positivity rates were some of the lowest I've seen in anybody that's been doing testing. I mean, it was phenomenally low when we had areas down here. I live in Lansing. We had positivity rates in this town of 30%. But up on campus, I mean, it was 2-3%, sometimes lower than that. Again, that doesn't mean we can just stop because we're in a more of a global situation than just our campus at Northern. We have to be aware of a lot of other things. And so in terms of the mass, I think it's staying the course for the time being.
Yeah, Steve, I think that's a great point because we have had the opportunity to keep a very safe environment at the university and in the surrounding community, which is extremely important. I think recently the mandate was lifted for everything but the labs and the classrooms. So, we're trying to make, as many strides as we can. I think everyone would love to live in an environment where we could be all mask free again. But until we know that the signs are telling us that we are absolutely safe, we just need to be cautious for everybody's sake.
Yeah, Carrie, I don't know if you want to add to what Alexis said, which is good points.
I can really only reiterate what she said. The evidence suggests that what we're doing is what we should be doing. As far as anybody who's immunocompromised, that's why we're continuing to distribute the higher level masks, the KN95, because it does protect the individual. So.
And we did have a few questions come in about the immunocompromised individuals in our community and our concern for them. So I don't know, Carrie, if you want to, or Mike, if you want to add anything to that at all.
Well, if I could just add one thing before we do that, I see one of the questions deals with, is there a possibility of the mask policies being reinstated currently? I don't think we've made any change to our current mask policy as it is now, and that is in classrooms and in labs. That's remains unchanged.
Correct.
I would just add, we follow the CDC guidelines, and those are the guidelines for immunocompromised individuals or people who are at a higher risk. Best thing is to get vaccinated. I know some immunocompromised people, the vaccines don't work as well, but it is recommended that they wear KN95 or higher mask, which does protect them. So we're continuing to distribute those masks. I don't know, Mike, if you have anything to add, but I think that's pretty much the gist of it.
That is, and you can get the masks at the Dean of Students office and the police department 24 hours a day. So.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions that have come in. I'll start with the first one that are related to disinvestment with NMU's 2030 sustainability plan and goals for carbon neutrality. Is disinvestment something that the Board of Trustees would support? And a similar one, we have two questions. Thank you for taking the time to listen to students. We talked about support for Ukraine. I appreciate NMU's outspoken support. For the last few months, Disinvest NMU has worked to advocate for disinvestment, and we are happy to have gained some support on campus. Looking into NMU's endowment, I see that we are indirectly invested in several Russian fossil fuel companies, although a very small percentage. So, a question there about whether we'd be willing and interested in disinvesting in the Russian fossil fuels in the near future.
I think, Greg, do you want
to? This issue has been brought up at the board level. In fact, we've asked staff to start looking into that. And if anybody's been following the disinvestment process, they know it takes time to be able to do that. In fact, I think even Michigan, the state of Michigan is looking into those avenues itself from an article I read the other day. I know that I've talked to Gavin about that, And he has been involved with our investment people, and he may be able to better talk about the details and time frame for doing that. So if Gavin can step up.
Yep. Yeah, I'd be glad to, Greg. Yeah, we have received that. I have provided information, some of which the students have provided to us. And what it takes is it's going to be some educational looks by the investment firm to have with the board on what the challenges are and opportunities with moving toward the best approach. Trying to tie that in with their fiduciary responsibilities for the university. So it's going to take a little bit of time to adjust. One of the challenges you have with the size of investments we have compared to some of the larger entities, the opportunities to get in certain funds are a little more limited at our asset size. So they're trying to look at what opportunities we'd have, what risk we'd have, and provide the best education to the board members to make a sound decision on moving forward. So it's a process that will definitely be looked at. Part of it is there's an ESG score with environmental, social, and I always forget the last one, and governance perspective scores of investment firms. That is part of that consideration. The other challenge you have is moving into certain funds. Not all fund managers, while they don't have any investments in fossil fuels, don't have a policy statement that they won't ever invest in fossil fuels. So that creates some challenges in moving to funds also. So it will be brought up. It will be discussed with mainly through the finance committee and the investment portfolio, and make sure everybody has all the education they need to make the best decision moving forward.
So the quick answer is the process has started, and I think that's good. But just like a lot of things, when you're dealing with the bureaucracy, and we are bureaucracy here, it does take a little bit of time. But again, I think the student who brought that question is pointing out an issue that needed to be looked at. And I have to say our staff was already on it. So that's really good.
Yeah, and I would just add to, Greg's actually the one that sent a note to all of us a few weeks ago about this, and got us started thinking about it. So Greg, thank you, because that really has initiated some of this discussion we're having now and about where we take this. And as Gavin points out, it's a complicated thing. I was talking to our state treasurer the other night, and she was talking about the pension fund investments, which are in the billions of dollars. I think it's 120 some billion dollars. And they are doing a inventory now of any funds they have that may be associated with Ukrainian or Russian interests. And she said it's a very, very small percentage. But I said, that's not really the point, that it's a small percentage. It's the fact that they're there. And I think that's what we all need to kind of keep in mind and look at. And I know I can't speak for the whole board, but I'm speaking for myself. I know it's something that we're looking at.
So I think you've answered part of this question, but I'm going to read the question because it's somewhat related to see if there's any additional comments that you want to make specific to this. How does the board consider finances and financial investments when making efforts to improve sustainability at Northern? Many environmentally sustainable and environmentally conscious mutual funds are available and have shown data-backed success. Would the board consider divesting from fossil fuels and working with current NMU faculty or outsourced services to find appropriate investments for the school? So you've talked a little bit about the process. Greg, you might want to add a little more to that.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why, again, I asked, and I think Steve is going to follow through with having the carbon neutrality update coming at our next meeting, because this all falls into that category as far as I'm concerned. And that's, how do we look at ourselves 5-10 years down the road? where we're going, of course, our investments we have now, and how we go about doing all our construction that we're going to be doing over the next number of years, all falls into this category. And so we have to think long-term, do some good planning, and the board itself needs to be updated and educated in terms of where we're at. I suspect that the first part of this, and Carrie could probably, or Gavin could step in, is just trying to see where we're at. What's our baseline that we have now? And that in itself takes a little bit of time. But the process should be going forward, and hopefully we'll have some updates at our next official meeting in terms of where we're at.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Going back to the mask issue, there's two questions. They're somewhat similar, and both of them pertain to the idea of how can students make their voices heard and have some input on the mask policies. One person is on the side of wanting to potentially take masks off, and the other person who would like us to return to our former policy of having masks on in all of our public spaces, not just classrooms and lab areas. So I don't know if, Steve, if you wanted to add a little more to, or Carrie, if you wanted to add anything related to how students can make their concerns heard and potentially have impact on the policies.
Go ahead, Carrie, if you want to.
Sure. Students can email me at any time. As a matter of fact, I met with students this afternoon. And I also welcome appointments with students. Probably part of the difficulty with the mask policy and making these decisions all along, we followed what the CDC guidelines are. And, with the changing in the regulations that's happening across the country, every decision we make, we based on the best evidence we have, which is why we added Josh Sharp, who's a researcher, and Paul Mann, who also is a researcher, but also looks at clinical science, and Christy Rabinia, who's an infection specialist. And, what would be the safest, thing to do and the safest next step? Obviously, we have Dr. Kirkpatrick on too, who also supported this change. I do hear about the individuals who are immunocompromised, but over and over again, the research shows and suggests that they should continue wearing a mask, not just here, but in all places. So that's one of the reasons that we were very clear that we were going to continue testing and doing the KN95 distribution. It's one of those situations we're going to have people on both sides. I mean, I get a lot of emails too about, I don't want any mask. I don't want to test. I don't want any mask. The best thing anybody can do is get vaccinated and get a booster. And somebody asked why our campus doesn't give boosters. I just want everybody to know we do give boosters. You can go to the health center and you can get your booster shot there. So that's really important. That's really all I have to say on that, but I'd be happy to sit down and talk with anybody at any time. Just let me know, let Laura know.
Well, I think to what Carrie talked about is we do the boosters, and they should just contact the health
Health center.
health center. God, thank you. I was drawing a blank. The health center for information on that, Carrie.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure Dr. Kirkpatrick mentioned that.
May be confused that we're not giving boosters because we don't have it on the dashboard. And that was, part of that was because by the time some people were getting their second shot, the booster would have been down a ways. So we just didn't have that on the dashboard. But the health center does provide booster shots.
Yeah, so those are available and they are accessible clearly. And I think, with the mask, I mean, I would encourage those that have concerns about on either side is to let us know as a board. And one of the reasons we're having this listening session this evening is so we're made aware of some of these situations. And, we understand the masks are very difficult nut to crack, if you will. but again, we've done very well, and I don't think we want to do something quickly without thinking it through. And I think staying the course is the best course of action.
Yeah, and I just want to mention too, this has probably been a topic that's dominated 80 to 90% of our meetings and many of our discussions over the past several years. And President Schuling provides myself as the vice chair and Steve is the chairman, an update on a weekly basis. And this is something that's looked at, every day. It's monitored. We have the dashboard. And I definitely understand that it can be a polarizing situation in terms of people that are for, people that are against. Again, the primary concern for us is the safety and well-being of the entire community. And I just want to encourage also and stress that, for people that are immunocompromised and are not comfortable, please, you're encouraged to continue to wear your mask.
Exactly. That's why we emphasize that we won't tolerate anybody. We don't want people bullying anybody who chooses to wear a mask. We have a lot of faculty that choose. We have we have a lot of staff. I often will choose to wear a mask if I think that I'm going in an area where there's going to be a larger population. But the KN95s do provide good protection.
We did have one comment and question about the KN95s and their breathability and how some students do struggle or experience headaches or fatigue from the KN95s. Mike, you might want to comment really quickly on a couple of options we have that are at the level of KN95s, but are different options.
Yeah, we have a couple of different models of the KN95s here, and those individuals that are struggling with that can stop by here and they can try out. We can give them a couple of the other options to see if they're better. But we have had a few individuals that have opted to try some of these other alternatives, and they seem to be working fine for them. So if you want to stop by the police department, we have them at the dispatch.
And if you'd like to call for a booster shot, the number of the health center is 227-2355. I've been saying that for 2 years, so I do have that memorized now. Switching gears just a little bit, we have another question from a graduate assistant who would like to discuss GA stipends at NMU. This person writes, currently with the rising inflation rates and housing costs in Marquette, with GA stipends set at $10,800 per year, graduate students are under extreme financial pressure. I know that NMU is interested in increasing diversity, and I believe that because of the socioeconomic status and race are closely related in the US, this level of stipend will self-select for a less diverse population in the graduate departments. Would you all be willing to discuss or comment on the stipend increase to keep up with inflation, or perhaps offer reduced or free dining plans to offset these costs? I don't know, Alexis, if maybe you'd want to start, and then we'll have others jump in, and maybe Gavin as well.
Sure, I was just reading the question myself. Thanks, Cindy. No, it's an extremely important topic. I think that we all understand with inflation right now. There's quite a bit going on in the world. I'm not sure that I would be the best person to answer this question. Gavin, I'm not sure if this is something you could speak to. I'm still reading.
Yeah, we tend to look at that annually with do surveys of other universities and comparing the graduate stipends. And we do make adjustments, and similar to what we do on other contracts on campus. It is something that we will consider annually and look at it. The other one I thought was interesting is an idea of a special dining plan for graduate students. And I know we look at various dining plans for off-campus students, but that is something I'm going to take back to the dining area and see what they can look at with regard to graduate students.
And Gavin, when you say this is looked at once a year, what time frame is that?
Usually in the spring, and then,
Okay.
to get prepared for the next fiscal year.
Okay, so that would be coming up then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's something that we can look at and discuss, and I mean, it's a good point. I don't know what action we'd be able to take. We would have to have that discussion in more detail about where we are, and if we review it annually, that's coming up. It's spring now, at least it's spring down here. I don't know about up in the UP yet, but it's spring here, so.
Yeah, it's a
Spring's in
very,
July. No, I'm just kidding.
very, very good question. Thank you for that question. And bringing it to our attention.
This question says, with many of you also possessing higher ups or executive positions, either on boards such as Chairperson Savoy, or executive positions such as Chairperson Holmquist, and others in between, do you as board members think that this can have an impact on choices or votes as board members? So I think that they're trying to get at there, your experiences in both your profession and in the community. Do you think that this helps you as you vote on matters for the board? And I don't know, Tammy, if that's one that you might want to discuss.
Yeah, I stuck my hand up so that I could take on this one. So service on this board, on the Northern Michigan University Board of Trustees, gives rise to fiduciary duties. And included in the fiduciary duties is the duty of loyalty. What that means is that we have to make sure that all of our decision-making and all of the work that we do at Northern shows our loyalty to Northern. And in order to do that, every year we complete a conflict of interest statement so that we state specifically what all of our other interests are. To the extent that we have a financial interest in another entity, we would have, if an issue comes up between the two, we would have a direct conflict of interest, and we would not be able to vote on any issue having to do with that. What I have found, though, in those situations where I serve on another board, and I do, because the work that I do as an attorney tends to involve a lot of nonprofit corporations, I end up serving on a lot of nonprofit boards. In serving on those nonprofit boards, it's possible that I could have a not conflict of interest because it's not a financial connection to the other entity, but there's a perception of conflict of interest. So when we get to that situation, what we do is we ask the other board members for permission to not vote on a matter. And I know I have done that before. I know that Trustee Mahaney has done that before. There have been a number of other trustees who've had things where they've come up and we've had to ask permission to not vote on something because while it's not an actual conflict of interest, there's a perception that there could be a conflict of interest. And in those situations, we don't vote. So does it have an impact? No, it really doesn't, because we don't actually vote on anything where we have a conflict of interest. And like I said, we fill these things out on an annual basis so that it's always at the forefront of our minds. And not only that, but the secretary of the board has those all and can review them with the board chair if something's on the agenda that could give rise to it. I know that we've also had times when we've called the attorney for the university to describe the situation and to ask for an opinion whether there's actually a conflict of interest. And that's where we get into this situation where we might say, actually, it's not a conflict of interest, but because I brought this up, I'm concerned about it. And I think I'd like to ask permission to not vote. So that's how we handle it. And I see that another question came up down the line here, specifically about the hospital. I suspect some of that is directed toward me because Trustee Holmquist is also mentioned in it. And while she is the CEO of UPHP, that's still not the hospital. I sit on a board that is a community board. It's an advisory board for UPHS, the hospital, Marquette. It's not the entity that controls the real estate. And in fact, our board finds out the information at the same time that the newspaper reports it. So there isn't an actual conflict of interest in terms of my service there, but more than that, it's the foundation and not Northern Michigan University that has this, this agreement with the entity that's holding that real estate. Actually, Trustee Sepinen sent to most of us a blog post that was posted by Evan Bonzel, who's on the city council. He did a fabulous job, the city commission. He did a fabulous job explaining the relationship between the foundation and this property and how it isn't Northern Michigan University. So sorry to go on about that one, but that's kind of the way this piece worked through. While it may look to some like there's a conflict, if there were, we wouldn't be allowed to vote. If there seemed to be, we would ask to not vote. But with respect to that hospital property, it isn't our issue, and none of us will be voting. So that's it.
Before we leave that topic, since there is a question about the hospital property, Brad, would you quickly like to add any comments?
Yes, the only comment would be that we have been very transparent in sharing publicly. In fact, in the Mining Journal today was the announcement of the RFQ and where that stands, as well as that announcement had a history of the steps taken to date and what will occur after this, potentially with the city of Marquette. And so primarily most of the information is in the public domain, except for those confidential requirements that are the response to the RFQ, which we'll have in the future, but that arrangement will become public eventually going forward. So we're in the final stages of this, and it's a win-win-win for the university, the community, and the hospital. And we're just trying to find the final steps in the pathway here. And we look forward to that in the very near future, which should be the end of May.
Thank you. I'm going back to a question that came in a little earlier. I don't want to lose this one. It says, in planning for new buildings, it has been stated that history and political science, alongside other humanity departments, will be put in the building with the business school. This has been viewed by many fellow students as underscoring these departments more so than they already are, since they remain understaffed and funded. Can you comment on this issue? And Tammy, I know you've been involved in some of the building projects, and Gavin may also have a few comments.
Well, actually, I think that this makes sense for Gavin to talk about in terms of who's going to be in the building, because while it is going to be the business school, whether other departments need additional space, that's not something that we as a board have talked about. So Gavin?
Yeah, we're working on that with actually Dale Kapla and the deans on which are the most appropriate departments to be in there. Some are coming out of Grease Hall, as you know, that will be moving into the academic mall area, and reviews being done with academic affairs to determine which departments fit best in which of the facilities. Final determination hasn't been decided on which departments those are. I don't know, Dale, if you have anything more you want to add to that.
No, Gavin, that's correct.
I would just add to that. I think that those kind of discussions or concerns, I think, are premature at this point. I mean, we're so far from being down that road at this point. There's a lot of discussions. I mean, this project is 3 years perhaps down the road, and there's going to be a lot more input that's going to be dealt with before any of those decisions are made. It's very premature.
Yeah, you're correct, Steve. No final decisions, of course, have been made because of the timeline here. But we do meet regularly, and we talk with deans and other departments on what would be the best fit. So those are ongoing conversations.
Okay, thank you. We have a comment about commuter students. It says, I would like to see more stipends for commuters and such, because I know there have been some offered in the past, but I'm a student and I don't live on campus. So it would be nice if commuters were acknowledged more. Is the university currently considering more inclusive practices for commuting students? And I'm not sure if there's any board members who feel comfortable answering this one, but I'm guessing that Chris Greer could talk a little bit about our attention to commuter students, and then any board members can jump in as well.
We have a very large commuter student population, and so we pay attention to them at this point. We always have. I think there's probably, I've been thinking about a commuter lounge. We don't have a student center, so that would be one spot where I'd put it. I'm not sure what you mean by stipends for commuter students. I'm not sure what that means, but if any commuter students would like to start a student organization, we've been trying to do that for years and we don't have any takers. But often starting a student organization is the way to have your voices heard. But we can never seem to get traction for that. But if you're interested, whoever wrote that question, just come in and talk with me and I'll see what we can do about it. Or if you have ideas about how we can help our commuter students, we want to hear them.
Yeah, President Schuling, I was thinking of an email Steve and I received from you from Brad Canale last week. Is there anything that we're able to speak to yet on that?
No, we're getting that all figured out. There's more red tape than we originally thought about. So that's why we haven't mentioned it. Now that's a Pandora's box.
Never know what you can say.
But we are definitely working on something important for our commuter students. But until we have it absolutely nailed down, we really can't talk about it.
Okay.
So stay tuned. Any commuters who are on, stay tuned. We should know by the end of this week or early next week.
And we have two questions going back to uses of buildings. I'll give you both of them. And then Tammy, you might want to start, and then Gavin might have some more details along with Dale as provost. But one attendee is asking, why not use the hospital for nursing and biology labs rather than knocking it down for something not beneficial to the university? Brad may also have comments on that. And the other is Northern is not fit to be a business school. We are in a space fit for environmental and earth studies, yet this department is understaffed. Why waste the money on an enterprise center? You can learn business anywhere. There are amazing business schools in Michigan. Northern will not be one of them. We have the chance to be a center for nature studies. So if anyone, Tammy, if you'd like to start on that.
Sure. So Northern is a comprehensive university, which means that we have a lot of departments and we serve a lot of students who have varied interests. The fact that the student writing the question may have an interest in environmental or earth studies doesn't mean that we need to preclude students who have an interest in business. And business actually has a lot of students enrolled in it. So what we are doing is we are providing the facilities for the students who we have and the students to come. The business school, there is a good fit for it because we have the students who want to attend it. I understand that the concept is that we have a beautiful natural scenery here, but that doesn't necessarily preclude a person who is interested in business. And there are a number of people who have businesses here in this community. So in terms of that concept, I think you have to remember that it's a comprehensive school. And then with respect to the other question regarding knocking down the hospital for nursing and biology labs, I think we again have to remember that the concept here is not that the foundation is acquiring this property to be used for university purposes, but rather that the foundation is doing something that is not necessarily with a goal to annex that property to the university. It instead is reuse of that property. So Brad, if you'd like to talk more about the reuse, I don't know how much you want to say about that.
Trustee Savoy has summarized in these comments and the comments to the last question, this status very, very well. Bottom line is the reason the foundation took the step we're taking to be a catalyst in facilitating a transaction is because the determinations that current facilities are they are functionally obsolete. It would cost a lot more to transition those facilities to usable space rather than to take the path we're taking to facilitate the demolition and then a transfer to a master developer. So at the end of the day, the other element is that the protection of that space next to the university and the ultimate redevelopment is the driving point. And it's the value to the university in having additional housing as well as the value to the community. So those are the those are the variables in play. And we're trying to bring to conclusion in the very near future. And I believe that the public discourse in this conversation now has come to a very good point that we're near the finish line and we have some additional steps to take, but we're all looking at the winning outcome. And that should occur pretty soon right now because on the financial side, it works. On the final implementation side, we've got some steps to get over, but we're almost there and those will be released very soon. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add too, I think, when looking at that and just saying, well, we should use that and retrofit it for labs, that's easier said than done. This building there's all kinds of environmental issues with the building. There's all kinds of problems with that. We want to address that in a different way in terms of lab space and some other things. And we're already working with Gavin, his team, and Carrie and her team on addressing those issues. It doesn't involve retrofitting some behemoth hospital that's been vacated. It involves doing some things, on campus that we're looking at. So it's not that we're saying we shouldn't do that. I think what we're saying is that the right property to do it? We would have to acquire the property. You're going to have to basically tear that building down because retrofitting would be prohibitively costly. So those are some of the things that have gone into that discussion. And again, the point that Trustee Savoy made, is that this is the foundation. It's not the board that's doing this. The foundation itself, which is a separate entity, is doing this project. We're obviously aware of it and been kept informed of it, but this is not something that the board is doing. The board of trustees that is before you right now on this call tonight.
Gavin, do you have any comment on the labs discussion?
I think Steve pretty much covered it, but we do have plans to add labs as part of our projects that we have coming up here. That should address the needs that we have on campus.
Thank you. Another question, another topic. Currently in Marquette, it is very difficult to find access to high quality childcare. This makes it difficult for students with children to attend NMU in class. As a leader in the community, would NMU consider starting a childcare program for students and local residents? Could this be a good use of the old hospital?
I want to take this one on, Cindy. This is something that we have been talking about. In fact, a couple board meetings ago, we had a luncheon where we had various faculty with us, and I sat at a table with a professor who outlined to me in no uncertain terms the difficulties that she's faced in getting childcare, talking about wait lists that are 2.5 to 3 years long, and the problems it presents not just for her as a faculty member, but for students and staff and others that work for the university. We went back and talked about this as a board, and we're actually having some very active discussions right now about what can we do to address that situation. We think between, affordable and accessible childcare and affordable and accessible housing, these are a couple of the biggest challenges we face right now when you look kind of outside the box and you get away from programming and academics and some other things. This is it's a very high priority, and I know that we had some really good discussions when we were up there a few weeks ago about some options that are being considered. And I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't say, so I will defer to Gavin or whoever else on some of those options if they can be talked about. But it's something we're looking at. It's a great question.
Yeah, Dale and I and Rhea Deaver from Human Resources have been looking at several options. One is to look at a partnership option to sort of partner on an expansion to provide a priority for our students and faculty to get access to healthcare. Another is to create an alternative. So if some prefer not to have them in larger healthcare facilities, to have a certified home child care. And we're working with an organization that certifies and monitors the development of in-home child care services. And so we're trying to go down a couple of paths to try to help address the variety of needs that there are for child care. Because some people just need drop the child off for a few hours and go to class. Others need all-day service. There's a variety of needs. So I think it's not a one-size-fits-all answer to this problem. And so we're trying to work with a couple of models to try to build something that'll work for faculty, staff, and students on campus. I don't know, Dale, if you want to add anything else to that, but we're moving forward in those directions.
Gavin, the only thing I would really add is that Marisa just received a grant from the state of Michigan, a Tri-Share grant. And what that does is help defray the cost of childcare. And it's called Tri-Share because there's three entities involved: the employer, the employee, and the state of Michigan. And so 1/3 of the cost is borne by each. We're happy to say that Northern is the first employer to sign on that grant that Marisa received, and we're working very, very closely with them on how we're going to administer that. So there's more to come on that probably within the next few weeks. We'll have an announcement on how we're going to move forward with that.
If I could just add something as more of a general comment on this, it's a lot of times, these kind of sessions are important to us, and that's why we want to do more of these, because that lunch we had kind of planted that seed with me and several others that were at the table. And that's how we kind of find out about things when we have the opportunity to interact with students, when we have the opportunity to interact with faculty and staff. These kind of bubble up, and it may be things we're not even thinking about as board members. And that's why this communication priority that we've developed is so important, I think, to all of us as boards, because that's how we can get feedback on some of these key issues. Now, does that mean because you run into one of us and you say, hey, this is not a good deal and you guys need to fix that, that's going to happen automatically? No, but it's going to prompt discussions, is my point. And I think that's the main thing, and hopefully that you can take away from this session tonight, that, you are being listened to. You're not just being listened to and forgotten about. And I think this is a prime example of that, where this issue was bubbled up, and now we're really in some active discussions that Dale and Gavin have pointed out.
Thank you. And just a point of clarification, Marisa, for any of the attendees who wouldn't know what that is, it's our intermediate school district here in the Marquette Elder area. So that's the organization Dale was referencing. Our next question is about parking, our favorite topic. With the upcoming projects, has there been any talks about expanding the parking situation at Northern? with more lots or a parking structure. With the extreme cold and weather conditions that Marquette is home to, walking from a far lot in the middle of the night in the winter is not safe for anyone. So again, Tammy has been involved in some of the discussions with the different construction projects. Steve has also been involved. And of course, Gavin is overseeing a lot of those discussions about parking. And then we have our parking coordinator here, Mike Bath. So we probably start.
Sure, I'll start off with this one. I know that parking is always an issue, and it's one of those things that everyone would like to park right in front of the building that they need to go to. There's no question, everyone would like to have the best parking space every single time. But with the number of students that we have, you have to recognize that it's not going to happen. And we have a very walkable university, so that the lots that are out there are positioned so that you can walk to the building that you need to go to. I know that with the new building projects, parking is certainly something that Gavin is looking at with every single one of those, because he knows that this is one of the big questions. We have so many commuter students that this has always got to be an issue. And I know Chief Bath, you probably would like to have a comment on this one as well, because I'm sure you hear a lot about it too. So I'll turn it over to the two of you, but I know that parking is always an issue. And while it would be nice to have the closest spot, we do often have to plan ahead and recognize that we'll be walking.
Yeah, Mike, you review the parking numbers consistently, and a lot of what the numbers are is what drives where we're looking at some of these construction, as well as we do have dollars built into the overall project plan for parking based on the renovations that we'll be making.
Every time we have a building project, we review the parking lot designations, and we have a parking and traffic committee, which is comprised of faculty, staff, and students. In fact, Tom Keller, who's on the call tonight, is on that committee. And we do lot surveys, and we check and see utilization of parking lots and walking distances. And as Tammy mentioned, we have a very walkable campus. I also like to point out that if you don't feel comfortable after the hours of darkness, we do offer a safe walk program where you can call the police department, and I'll have somebody come and walk with you either from a building back to the residence halls or from a building to your vehicles and vice versa. But we do look at the parking, and we got a couple of projects that are coming up that do have some additional parking lots being looked at this point. Some of it will depend on the actual footprint of the building and the locations. But we do review that. We meet monthly, and as there is a representative from the facilities department on that committee, and he presents every meeting on all the building projects and parking lots, so that we're well informed, and then we make the decisions based on utilization. And as some of you realize or noticed, we have changed some designations in the last couple of years based on the need and the locations of some of our newer buildings. So we have modified some parking and added quite a few parking spaces. So it's something that's looked at around every building project, and looked at during the academic year too. So
how would someone get input to you, Mike or Gavin or whoever it is, on some of these projects about the parking issue?
Through their ASNMU reps, which is Tom Kettler. There's 3 individuals that are part of ASNMU, and they're the ones that bring a lot of those concerns. Or you can write to me, email it to me as well, and I bring all those communications to the Parking and Traffic Committee. Like I said, we meet monthly, and a lot of input comes from the student reps that are on that, and there's opportunities to serve through ASNMU and be a student rep on that committee. And as Tom can probably tell you, it can be some pretty interesting conversations in those meetings about how parking is, because to Tammy's point, everybody wants something 10 feet from the building, but that's not possible. So
I think Greg had his hand up there. Sorry.
Yeah, Steve, and you could probably relate to this when you were a student here, going back 50 years. And I can remember 50 years ago, this was a hot topic, and I don't think it's changed since. I will say that I like some of the new parking spots that have come up. It's much better than it was 50 years ago. The chief back 50 years ago, when the problem was brought to him about parking, his solution was to raise the tickets, the price of the tickets that they hand out. Gavin's kind of smiling, but as a student, I could tell you that was not an appropriate response to the issue. And I'm glad to see that we're trying to be creative in working with the land and the footprints that we have. But yeah, parking is always an issue, and hopefully it is better, but we could probably even make it better in the future.
Yeah, Greg, I was a commuter student too. That's why I was smiling, and back 35 plus years ago. So parking's better now, but it's never, it's just never perfect. And that's why we're always reviewing it. And we have that committee to get input on. And we utilize feedback that goes through the committee and developing future parking plans. And when we looked at parking structures, they're just they're just quite expensive per parking spot, well over $20,000 per spot to construct, which makes them very costly. And then the maintenance costs and those are fairly significant. So that is something that we have looked at in the past as a potential, but just hasn't been financially feasible at this point yet.
Cindy, there's two more questions that got added on bus transportation. I can answer those. Prior to COVID, Northern has since 2004 had a contract with MarkTran. So any faculty, staff, and student can ride any MarkTran route in the county free of charge with your student ID. Because COVID, MarkTran is not doing their countywide routes right now. As soon as that's reinstated, we will continue that contract. So those that are in Ishpeming, Negaunee, we have a number of students that utilize that. And then especially coming out of Sawyer and Gwynn. Somewhere, Tom, if I remember right, 20,000 rides a semester, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere up pretty high. So we do offer that, but unfortunately, because of the federal transportation rules, MarkTran is not doing their county routes right now. But as soon as those come back into play, we'll reinstate that. We do offer a Friday afternoon shopping shuttle for those that live on campus. It meets in lot 9. It'll take you up to Target, Meijer, and Walmart, and then it'll bring you back an hour or two later. We do runs from 3 o'clock until 5:30 at night. So, and that's very popular. We have a lot of students that utilize that. So those two things, and that's all on our website if you need help with that. And hopefully as soon as the federal transportation rules change with COVID, MarkTran will get back onto their county routes and we'll continue that service.
Hey, Mike, I didn't see the question, but what were the questions, if you could?
They were asking about considering public transportation, students being able to have a shuttle service from Ishpeming and Negaunee, run a few times a day. So we contracted with MarkTran, which is the countywide transit system, and they can utilize that service for free.
Okay, thank you.
Before we leave transportation and parking, I want to give Tom the opportunity, if you have any comments about serving on the committee, I want to make sure you have that opportunity if you wanted to say anything.
I don't have anything.
Okay. There was a question about new programs and how Northern looks at new departments, new programs, and they were looking specifically into counseling. But I think in general, the question about new programs is a good one. And I know Tammy has served on the academic committee and might have a few comments, and then we can go to Provost Cap.
How about if we start with Alexis and have Alexis do it, because she actually chaired that committee more recently than I did.
Okay.
having a little chat conversation with Carrie in the questions, and I'm not technically that great, so I didn't realize it made her question go away, but she was specifically asking about counseling and how if there's an opportunity for this program at some point. As a chair of the Academic Affairs Committee, I had the opportunity to get a little bit of insight into this process. And obviously, there's a lot of things that we take into account, or the university takes into account when looking to put together new programs. And one of those is the demand for programs, as well as, you know, the outlook for jobs, et cetera, and the infrastructure we have to support those programs. I can't speak specifically to counseling. I don't know if someone can, and maybe if someone who can answer that question from the university perspective, also kind of glean some insight into if students have interest in new programs, who would they talk to about those, and how can they get traction on that? So I answered a question with a question.
You know, Alexis, there is the MSW program that we have, the Masters in Social Work program. But when they're saying counseling, I suspect that they're talking about psychology. Dale, is there a psychology program that goes beyond? Is there a master's in psychology?
There is a master's, is an ABA master's, and they are actually turning that into more of a general master's. But students can still get, master's students can still be certified in applied behavior analysis. There is a graduate, brand new, there is a 14-credit graduate certificate in psychological sciences that's moving its way. It's a proposal. It's moving its way through the approval process through the various faculty committees, and eventually it'll go on to the board. And it's students that are in the graduate program in psychological sciences can take that. And those are classes that will count towards them earning a limited license as a counseling psychologist. And so that may be a year or so out, but that is in the pipeline. But like you mentioned, Tammy, they do have, you know, there is the MSW, and of course I mentioned the ABA. And if students have, you know, ideas for programs, certainly we're willing to listen to those, and they could talk to their professor, they could talk to the head of their departments, and geez, they can email me if they want to, if they have ideas for programs. And certainly we're willing to look at those for sure.
Yeah, and Tammy's right, the MSW program, I think that went in last year. It was more recent, last year or the year before.
We're actually in year 3. We graduated our first cohort last year of about 23 students, and we have that many now. So it's full. It's a full program.
I think Steve Van Noten has his hand up.
Yep, Steve?
Yeah, with regard to the 4 courses that students need to serve as limited license practitioners in the state of Michigan, those courses are being offered. It just won't be a university credential as an actual certificate, probably until a year from this fall. But if students still have access to the courses in their master's program in psychology, and if they take those courses, they can serve as a limited license practitioner in Michigan. So you don't need the actual university credential, you just need to have taken the courses.
And I wondered if both Steve or Dale, or maybe both of you, could comment very briefly on the idea that Northern is always looking at new programs. We kind of always have this discussion going on, and through the academic senate, through the departments. Maybe you guys could comment on that briefly for the students.
Yeah, that's correct, Cindy. I mean, there's always, these academic departments are always looking at new programs, and they're having these discussions, whether they're informal or formal. And they're generating these ideas, you know, running it by their colleagues and seeing the feasibility of it. And we see quite a few new program ideas come through often. So the discussions are always occurring, and they really occur at the faculty level. They are generated at the faculty level. That's why I said, if students have any ideas, mention it to their professors. And, you know, and go visit another department if it's another discipline that they're not in, because those discussions can be had at a faculty meeting, and then they bubble up and they end up, you know, up in my area. And that's how we get new programs started, successful ones.
Cindy,
ahead.
if I could, one of the topics, and I was looking through the questions here, and I didn't see anything, but one of the topics was brought to us prior to this was the presidential search. And I would like to comment on that or have, there's two people on this call tonight from the board that are on the Presidential Search Advisory Committee, at least from the board. That's Tammy and myself. So if that's appropriate, maybe we could update everyone on where we are with that.
That sounds great.
We several months ago hired a executive search firm. It's called Parker Executive Search, and they're out of Atlanta. And they have been helping us with our presidential search. We formed a Presidential Search Advisory Committee, known by the acronym PSAC, which is comprised of 22 or 23 people, students, faculty, staff, community members, board of trustees members around there. And we've had several meetings. We just recently revised our timeline for looking at filling the presidential slot. We had hoped to have something by this summer, but given some logistics issues and some other things, we've extended that timeline. That our hope is that by September we would have identified and brought on board, at least made an offer to a candidate. Then, of course, we need to go through whoever that individual is, needs to make accommodations for where they currently may be. So, it's possible this would extend into later this year or the beginning of next before we actually onboard somebody here. But the process is moving along, and we've had our PSAC has been very active. We've had 7, I think, listening sessions. Chris is on here, and if I've misstated that, we had, I think it was 7 listening sessions that were kind of like this, where we actually had one with students. That was one of our most productive ones, I thought, where we got some really, really good feedback. And we did those, and we've gathered all that information. So that process is moving along. Some may argue that it's not going as fast as we had hoped, and all of us are impatient, I guess, but that's kind of the reality of where it is. And I don't know, Tammy or Chris, whether you want to add anything to that about where we are and where we're heading.
Sure. I think initially we had really hoped that we were going to be bringing a candidate to campus before this semester ended. We were kind of surprised to think it could happen that fast. And in fact, it couldn't quite happen that fast. But the big part of the reason for that is the overlapping spring breaks between the university and the community. So the public schools, because we have community members, also the people who are community members, a lot of them planned their vacations around the school break. And yet we had our students and faculty, obviously, who had planned any vacations they were planning to take around the university's break. So with those 2-week-long breaks, it made it pretty impossible for us to have meetings that would enable the PSAC to do the interviews and the selection from the candidates and still give the recruiters the opportunity to go out and find those candidates. So what they came back to us with was that it just was not feasible for us to be bringing a new candidate to campus before the end of the semester. And when they looked at it and gave us their reasoning, it really does make a lot of sense to say it's not that we need to rush through this. It's far more important that we get a great slot of candidates, a really good field to choose from. Far more important that we end up with the right person than it is that it happened fast, because we have a wonderful president in place right now. And we have a spectacular executive team. Things are going very well on campus. We are not in that big a rush. It's far more important that we get a really good candidate.
And I think, and I want to add some, because Tammy, you just made me think of something too, that one of the threshold decisions that we as a board made early on in this process was there's two ways to do this, as I'm told, and I'm not an expert on presidential searches, but this is what I've learned, is that you can do a closed search or you can do an open search. And a closed search is kind of what it says. I mean, you kind of have some meetings and then the board decides who that candidate's going to be, and then all of a sudden that candidate is announced. We decided not to go down that road. We wanted transparency and openness, and we've undertaken an open search, and which is really a key thing, because we could have chosen to go the other way. But with that came some of the points that Tammy is talking about in terms of logistics, that we wanted to make sure that when we brought the candidates to campus for a visit, that they weren't coming to an empty campus devoid of students and most of our faculty and most of our staff, because it's the middle of the summer. We wanted to do it when we had students there, we had an active community, and they could see what it's like, what our campus is like when it's populated with students and faculty and staff. So that was the other logistics issue that we came about. If we were trying to do this along the original timeline, it would have precluded us from doing that. That's why we kind of backed off it, so that we can do that now this fall, and you'll have an opportunity to meet these candidates as a student body, as will others. So just wanted to add that clarification.
Yeah, and this is one of the most important things that we as a board will do. This by far one of the most important things that we will be doing. So we wanted to make sure that we had an excellent group of people, widely diverse, covering all of campus, involved in this. And we have given a lot of people the opportunity to come forward. In fact, we've given everybody the opportunity to come forward and talk to us about what they found important. The job description is put together. It's they're out there recruiting now. Anybody who has ideas about who would be a good candidate, there's ways that you can go on the website and put in that information, and the recruiters will go out there and talk to the person. So we are active in this, and it's a great process. I think it's going to go very well.
Yeah, and I misspoke earlier, and I apologize when I said that Tammy and I were on the PSAC. We also, Missy Holmquist was on the PSAC before she got appointed to our board. So she kind of predated all this and was a very, very active member of the Presidential Search Advisory Committee, and is continuing in that role as we speak. So I'm sorry, Missy, because you were put on as a community member, and all of a sudden you're a colleague on the board.
No, I understand. But this is one area where I could actually jump in. I know I've been very quiet, but I've been taking this opportunity really just to listen and learn. But, I echo a lot of the comments made by both Stephen and Tammy, in that it's been a very interesting process in the listening sessions. I think we're learning so much from the different stakeholders. And again, I think I was able to join, all but one session. So it's been really informative, and I'm excited to see the process move forward. And again, I think the most important thing is finding the right person. So it may take a little longer than we had expected, but I'm confident that in the end we'll find the right person.
Yeah, thanks, Missy. That's a good point.
All right, thank you for that. There were 2 questions that came into the NMU Pres box. We had allowed questions to come in advance of the forum for those who could not attend. Actually, I think there's 3 questions. I'll hit those very quickly. The first was asking about how does the Board of Trustees decide on the tuition rates? What's involved in that decision? And I know Greg Sepinen is a member of the Finance Committee, and maybe he can start us off with a few comments there.
Oh, thanks. I'm searching for how to answer this appropriately. And I'm going to go back to last year when we went with the level of increase that the state allowed. And there was a lot of discussion on the board in regards to the tuition increase. It's obviously a major issue concerning all the students. And Gavin obviously is the key person in terms of talking about what the university needs are relative to that part of our cash pie, our income. And it was interesting to me as a new board member to see how this is fleshed out. But the process is one where, and Gavin's going to have to step in here, or Carrie, is one where the staff basically is coming up with a recommendation on what it should be and what the needs are and the reason why we should go with the staff recommendation. The board then has to take that information and agree with it or not. And the past has been the structure, the way the state legislator, the state government has set up the process of school funding. You're almost trapped in a situation of following the state level of what would be the top of the approved amount. And if I'm not mistaken, if you go higher than that, you are penalized. And if you go below that, you find yourself in a situation where you may regret that 2 years down the road because it has a compound effect on what your finances will be relative to the tuition piece of the pie. So you could tell that this is still an issue with me in terms of trying to grasp that that issue. And I'm going to be looking for Gavin to kind of explain why this situation is the way it is relative to the way the state has set the universities up to follow and deal with their cap on tuition. So I'm just going to now turn that over to Gavin to try to make sense of what I just said.
Pretty much hit most of the points there, Greg. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And one is, what level of state funding are we going to receive in any given year? Last year it was one-time money, no base structural money, and the state funding support for universities. There were some one-time dollars that were provided, but those don't support you in future years. State funding has been an issue for a while. If you look at in 2002, NMU received $52 million in appropriation. And in 2022, we received $48 million in appropriation from the state. So it's been the pressure on state funding, really not supporting the institutions long-term, that's put so much pressure on tuition over the years. And then you compound that with what are your inflationary costs going forward, or contractual commitments like on bargain salaries and other things that we have in the contract, or commitments that we have to maintain as a university, as well as the inflationary costs on supplies at the university, utilities, and other factors. So those pieces all get put into the mix, and then you have to take into the factor of where Greg was mentioning the state's policy on having restraint, tuition restraint. We always stay within the restraint. Some years we go below, but if you go below in a future year, if you actually would need more costs as you incur higher inflationary costs, you're not able to achieve reaching that goal for a rate adjustment because you'd be penalized. So you got to balance that in your equation of looking outward. Typically, we'll look at, what are the cost pressures on the universities? What are some of the reductions that we can take in place in our operations? What is the state funding level? And determine the appropriate adjustment in tuition. And the other thing we try to do to balance some of that on the students is adjust the scholarship and financial aid dollars that we issue to students. The last few years, we've been able to use some federal dollars to help support students with emergency grants and other things. So there's a lot of factors. It's not just one factor, but we do take many factors into consideration before the final recommendation comes forward.
And just jump in with another thought. One of the things that we looked at, and that is where we compare ourselves with the other state universities. And Gavin, if you want to just touch on that, because that is one of the things that for a new trustee, I looked at that, and that was one of the critical factors in terms of basically going along with the recommendation last year.
I can't believe I missed that point, Greg, is the other piece we do look at is where we are competitively in the state and where our tuition is. And we've been second most affordable in the state of Michigan for a long time. And with tuition restraint language, we'll basically be there forever. There's not a lot that will change that going forward unless state policy changes. So we're in that spot where we're going to be second and maybe no higher than third, down the road. And, we do include some things for students, such as, the notebook computers, part of their tuition and fees other schools don't provide, as well as the academic software. So overall, as a value point, I think Northern second most affordable and includes some other things that other schools don't include too.
Thank you. And then another topic that's come up, and maybe Alexis could talk about this for a few minutes, is diversity efforts, things that we're doing at Northern right now to improve our diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thanks, Cindy. Yeah, this is a really important topic for us, and as in part of our interim strategic plan, and will continue to be a part of our fabric as we move forward with initiatives in the university. I believe it was last summer in the June timeframe, the president has a committee on diversity, and then the presidential committee on gender and sexuality, who came and presented us with a 12-point plan, I believe it was, and there were 4 or 5 different work packages that came out of that Cindy, I know you are currently overseeing, in addition to Chris Greer. And they range on a lot of different topics in terms of creating a dignity policy, auditing what we have in terms of our diversity in our programs, et cetera. A specific DE&I training for students and staff. There's obviously a lot of facets that go into diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it's important to note that, diversity is extremely important as much as inclusiveness is. And that's something that, we really need to make sure that we have on our campus. So I think a lot of positive things are taking place as it relates to that. We are going to be waiting to bring the new president in before a selection is made on the new DE&I chief officer for the DE&I. And that's going to be an extremely important position as well, as we move forward. I see Tammy has her hand up.
I just was going to comment on the fact that the United Conference is something that has just been happening. In fact, you know that it's going on, and I'm hoping that a lot of the students have been involved and actively attending. Lots of really good things happening on campus with DI.
Thanks for that, Tammy. And it is also Women's History Month. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, Tammy, because I think it's extremely important as it relates to DE&I that students get involved wherever they can get involved. And this also, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be going to your own affinity groups either. It would be great to go to other affinity groups and learn about other cultures, etc. I can go on my soapbox, but Cindy, if you wanted to chime in, or Chris, and talk a little bit more about some of the work packages that you've got going on.
So Chris, I don't know if you want to make a few comments.
Okay, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the active work that's been happening. So we have been working on those 12 points that Alexis talked about. We have a diversity council now that meets every 2 weeks. Cindy and I have one-on-ones with the leaders of the different groups. SEEK, the President's Committee on Diversity, the President's Committee on Gender and Sexuality, International Studies, the Center for Native American Studies, and Disabilities. The Center for Disabilities have submitted ideas for restructuring their areas. We have a DEI management group that's looking at those ideas. And DEI is one of the 5 areas included in the university's interim strategic plan that is being worked on. So, and the President's Committee on Diversity, that list, that 12-point list, is incorporated into the interim strategic plan. So there's a lot happening, and Cindy and I are trying to keep it moving.
And it's some very exciting, opportunistic conversations. So I think there'll be a lot of information and new ideas coming out of these conversations over the next, the rest of this semester and going into next fall. So we're very excited about what's happening with these areas and with what's going to happen, I think, in the DEI areas in the future. And if anybody has questions about those, as we go forward, you could send those to Chris or myself or to NMU Pres, and we'll get them to the right area. Appreciate that.
If I could add something too, Cindy,
Sure.
on this topic and sustainability. When we did those listening sessions that we talked about earlier, we repeatedly heard about those 2 topic areas, if you will, in our listening sessions, not just with students, but with other listening sessions as well. So I think, at least as a member of the PSAC, and then also in discussions with our board, I think we all have a pretty good understanding and feeling for the high priority that's placed on those topics by our stakeholder groups.
Excellent. We did have another question come in to the NMU Pres earlier about the different types of governing boards in the state of Michigan. They were curious how Northern is different. Northern and some of the other universities are different from Michigan State, Michigan, Wayne State, but they weren't exactly sure how that was set up. So Steve, I didn't know if you wanted to take the lead, and then maybe Deanna might have some comments as well.
Sure. Yeah, and it's a really good question, and I'm glad it came up because there's several things I think we can address with that. Is that by the Constitution, the boards of the I'll just say, for lack of a better term, the big 3, Michigan State, Michigan, and Wayne State, have elected boards of trustees or regents, whatever the terminology is, depending on the institution. Those individuals are elected on a statewide ballot and serve terms of 8 years, but they stand for election statewide. The remaining universities, the 12 remaining universities by Constitution, their boards are appointed by the governor, and we are appointed for 8-year terms by the governor, subject to advice and consent by the Michigan State Senate. And I would point out that Missy, our newest member, will actually be undergoing her advice and consent hearing later this month on March 24th in Lansing, where she goes down and basically appears before a committee of the Senate, and they ask her questions and then determine, either yay or nay, and it is generally not an issue. But that's how we come to serve. And that's the difference between the big 3 and the rest of us. I would also point out that we do not serve at the pleasure of the governor. That is, we serve for an 8-year term. So the governor can't come in and say, I don't like what this person's doing or that person's doing. I want to kick them off these boards. We have a definite set term, at which time then we can either be reappointed or not reappointed. And I would also point out that none of us as board members receive compensation for serving on this board. We do this as a whatever, we obviously get some expenses covered, but we do not receive any compensation for being on the board. I think sometimes, and this is not unusual, I think sometimes there's some misconceptions about how we became to be on the board or how much money we make when we're on the board and those kinds of things. And if you really drill down on it, that's kind of the reality. It's an 8-year term, and we serve and we have a fiduciary responsibility, which was pointed out earlier. And our job is to make sure that we have a president, and we're involved in that process now with hiring a new president. Those are a couple of our main functions.
And Deanna, if one of our students wanted to serve on the board in the future, how would they do that?
Yeah, absolutely, Cindy. One thing I would say is, we certainly always are interested in alumni serving on the board. The board is always looking at its makeup of diversity and professional backgrounds. So we want to make sure that there's a good institutional fit for board members. But it really is as simple as visiting the governor's website. If you just go to michigan.gov, the governor's website has the forms available to nominate someone, to self-nominate. And it lays out pretty clearly what the responsibilities are for the various boards and how to move forward in nomination. So I encourage anyone to visit the governor's site if they're interested.
And just as a follow-up to that, because that's a really good point. One of the other, I think, misconceptions about the board is, how does somebody come to be on that board? We as board members, when we had a vacancy, when Donna Murray Brown left to go to Kentucky because of some family circumstances, we didn't get together and say, we want Missy Holmquist to be on the board. That's not how it works. We had absolutely, no input into that. Now we're very, very pleased Missy's on the board, and we obviously are very happy with that decision. But that's totally a decision by the executive office, and it is not done by us, or there's no vote by us to replace a member that's a vacancy, or a vacancy that's occurred because of terms ended.
Excellent. We have had another question come in related to our work with high-speed internet. It says, access to high-speed internet is important for inclusivity in rural areas near NMU. I know that you all offer the Wi-Fi chip in the laptop and routers, but those devices do not work outside of Marquette. Is NMU planning to push for high-speed infrastructure in the community since the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed in the Senate? So
I'll be glad to answer that, Cindy.
yes, I bet you will.
Yeah, we actually, it works in 115 communities in the Upper Peninsula. You would need the laptop would probably be needed for most areas outside of Marquette, because Marquette's so dense with the amount of signal. But if you contact the EAN office, they can work with you to ensure that you're getting that access. But it should, as an NMU student, as long as you have your CPE router, it can connect in any of the communities throughout the Upper Peninsula in which we provide service. And there are 115 communities, and they can actually do a geolocation right to the household or where you're trying to get access at to make sure that it's available in that area. So I really encourage you to contact the EAN office, and they can work with you to ensure that you get that access. And as a student, you're not charged for that service, so other than buying the CPE device.
And you'll want to explain what the EAN actually is and where it's located.
The Educational Access Network, and it's on the 5th floor in the Cohodes Administrative Building. There'll be a sign leading you up there, and they have lots of people there to help. Employed with a lot of students too that are very helpful. So they'd be glad to work with you. And as far as expanding access, we just received some federal dollars to add some more sites. $1.2 million was announced, and so we have some areas in the UP as well as the Northern Lower Peninsula, in which we'll be expanding our service through some federal funding that we'll be receiving.
Excellent. And one other email that came into NMU Pres is, can Northern become a plastic-free campus? If no, why not? I know, Gavin, you've looked at this. I'm not sure if the board members have been involved in this conversation.
We work on a lot of things to try to improve sustainability. I become completely plastic free. I'm not sure. I'd have to look for more information on that in the future. A lot of things we do in like dining services, revolve around different types of materials for plates and other things. But it's a good question, and we should continue to look at it.
Gavin, this is also, I would suspect, is going to be part of the carbon neutrality process.
Yeah, that's it.
And
We have two committees looking at sustainability committee and the carbon neutrality committee, and
there'll be overlap then.
Yeah, a little bit. Carbon neutrality is focused more on the facility and program side and sustainability, so that we do have some distinctions between the two areas to make sure we don't have a lot of overlap. But it is something that we have been looking at and trying to reduce the amount of plastic. Becoming 100% plastic free is, I think, the biggest challenge, though, on that.
So we have 10 minutes before we said we would wrap up. We have no new questions at this point. So I guess by raising your hand, I would be open to anybody who has some thoughts that we didn't cover that you think are important. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Chair Young for his closing remarks, and then on to Bethany as well. So let's start with Bethany.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So a student had asked about having a voice on some of those meetings, or in some of those decisions being made, and I did answer it. But for those who didn't see, the current structure that is in place at Northern is kind of assumes that students would relay concerns to ASNMU, who has positions on some of those meetings. I know I sit on the Carbon Neutrality Task Force. I'm also on the Presidential Search Advisory Committee, just things like that, to name a few examples. So the structure kind of assumes that students would relay their concerns to ASNMU, who would then be the student voice at those meetings. And, part of that is we don't have all of the student opinions, which is one of the reasons we wanted to set this forum up and kind of give students a chance to say some of those opinions. But I did, under the answered tab or something in the Q&A, I listed ASNMU's email address. So if students have additional concerns or want to get involved with writing legislation that they want ASNMU to present to the board or present to admin, things like that, we're always happy to get involved and hear more student voices. And we are entirely composed of students, so sometimes it's a little less daunting, but yeah, just another reminder that we are a resource and that we really do want to help.
Excellent. And before we go to President Schuling, Bethany or Tom, I don't know if you want to give a plug for the ASNMU elections coming up, how people could actually run for office, and then certainly how to vote, because I do believe they come up in about a month, right?
Yeah, I'm actually the chair of the elections this year. The elections should be happening on April 11th through the 13th. If people are interested in running, there was a student-wide email that went out yesterday, and there's an application. Those applications are due by the 1st, and then you run for the office, and then we vote then. And the voting is through an email. Everybody will get a link, and then, yeah, then they'll be announced.
Excellent. And Bethany, anything to add about ASNMU as an organization or running for office?
No, I guess just a general encouragement to do it. It's a really cool opportunity. And I'll be sending out the link to vote in about a month, I suppose. So look out for that, I guess.
Thank you. President Schuling?
Just two things I wanted to mention came up, stipends for GAs, and there was a question about GAs being involved in that. GAs were involved last year, and they absolutely would be represented this year. So I encourage them to contact Dr. Lisa Eckert, who reviews the GA stipends and works with Gavin. But we've always had a graduate, I think there were 2 or 3 last year, and then she also had a committee involved. So that would be somebody important to contact. As far as the masking goes and individuals who are immunocompromised, I texted Mike Bath, and we're going to look in to see if we can possibly get some N95 masks for immunocompromised individuals, because that affords the highest protection. Those were scarce when COVID was really rampant, but they aren't anymore, and the cost of them has dropped considerably. So we'll look into that and see if there's a way that we can meet that need as well. I didn't want individuals to think we were just ignoring that. That's all.
And I guess maybe one of the two of you should also mention, if you are wearing N95 masks, they need to be fitted. What does that mean?
Not all of them do. No, just some need to be fit tested. It depends what you're wearing it for. So no.
All right. Any other comments from the board members before it goes to Chair Young? Any comments from the senior staff? Well, before I turn it over to Steve, let us say that on behalf of the senior administrators, we appreciate you inviting us to participate in this and give some insight along with the board members. So Chair Young. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I did so well till just the very end. I just want to say it's been a really great experience for me, and I'm sure I speak for other board members when I say it was a 2 hours well spent as far as I'm concerned, and I certainly look forward to doing this again. I think this is really important. Like I said at the beginning, we don't view this as a one-off. We plan on trying to implement some sort of a schedule where we can do this periodically, a schedule that makes sense. And I want to thank Carrie, or Dr. Schuling and her team for hanging in there for 2 hours with us and helping us field some these questions that were that only they could respond to. So I appreciate that, and also want to thank my fellow board members for taking the time to do this tonight. And we appreciate it, and we appreciate the participation by the students. And we look forward to doing it again, Cindy. So thank you.
Thank you. And
I want to say thank you to Cindy. You did a great job moderating. So thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Everybody have a great night and enjoy the sunshine and warmer weather. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Bye
you.
now. Good night.